In the next few seconds, your brain is going to feel a strange mixture of recognition and resistance, because the very person you feel most attracted to might also be the exact person who is most dangerous for your emotional and psychological well-being. And the reason you keep running toward them isn't love or fate or coincidence, but a hidden, ancient mechanism inside your mind that has been quietly learning to associate pain with connection, chaos with excitement, uncertainty with desire, and dysfunction with familiarity. Right now, somewhere in your life, past or present, there is likely a person who made your heart race in a way that felt intense, addictive, and almost magnetic, even though deep down you sensed something wasn't right. And this is not because you are broken or foolish or attracted to drama, but because your brain is wired to mistake emotional inconsistency for deep chemistry. And the more unpredictable someone is with their affection, the more your nervous system becomes obsessed with winning their approval, as if love were a hunt and validation were a scarce prize. What you do not realize is that your brain does not seek what is good for you, it seeks what is familiar. And if your earliest experiences of love or connection were mixed with dismissal, distance, emotional unpredictability, or conditional affection, your brain encoded that pattern as normal. And now, in adulthood, it interprets emotional unavailability as a challenge, emotional coldness as mysterious, emotional distance as exciting, and emotional instability as passion. So when someone healthy, consistent, and safe steps into your life, they feel boring, uninteresting, or even suspicious, because peace does not activate the same neural pathways that chaos once did. You might think you are choosing people based on your preferences, standards, and conscious judgments. But in reality, your subconscious is in control, driving you toward the same emotional frequency over and over again, selecting people who trigger old wounds that still live in your body. Because on a deep psychological level, your brain believes that if you can finally fix this type of person, or finally earn their love, or finally make them stay, then the story of your past will be rewritten, and the pain that was once your fault will finally transform into proof that you are worthy. This is the dark psychology of attraction, and it has nothing to do with romance and everything to do with unresolved emotional conditioning, because the nervous system does not seek happiness. It seeks resolution, and it will drag you back into familiar emotional battlegrounds again and again, hoping that this time the outcome will be different, even if it means sacrificing peace, self-respect, stability, and safety along the way. You might notice how strongly you feel about them compared to others, how quickly you become attached, how deeply their approval matters to you, how intensely their absence hurts you, how powerful their presence feels, and you mistake this overwhelming emotional surge for true love, when in reality, it is the activation of an old attachment wound combined with a psychological pattern that was programmed long ago. And the more unavailable they are, the more valuable they seem to your brain. Because scarcity creates obsession, distance creates fantasy, and inconsistency creates addiction. When someone is emotionally unpredictable, sometimes warm and sometimes cold, sometimes loving and sometimes distant, they create what is called an intermittent reinforcement cycle, which is the same psychological mechanism that makes people addicted to gambling, because the brain does not respond strongly to consistent rewards. It responds most intensely to unpredictable rewards. And this is why, when they finally give you attention after withholding it, your brain releases a powerful surge of dopamine, and that chemical rush bonds you to them even deeper, even though they are the source of your pain. So every ignored message, every cold reaction, every disappearance, every confusing signal does not push you away. Instead, it pulls you in, because your brain is now trained to chase the high that comes from finally being chosen by someone who makes you feel unchosen most of the time. And the tragedy is that you mistake this cycle for passion, when in truth, it is a form of emotional conditioning that slowly erodes your sense of self and normalizes emotional deprivation. This is why you are not drawn to the one who wants you fully, but to the one who half wants you, because half acceptance is what your brain recognizes as familiar. And familiarity always feels safer to the subconscious than the unknown, even when that familiarity is toxic, draining, humiliating, or psychologically damaging. And so you walk past genuine love and run toward emotional risk, calling it excitement, when in reality it is simply your trauma wearing the mask of desire. You might have told yourself that they are just misunderstood, or that they had a hard past, or that if you love them enough, they will change. And this savior fantasy feels noble, romantic, even heroic, because it makes you feel special, chosen, needed, and important. But what is actually happening is that you are tying your worth to fixing someone who does not wish to be fixed, and your brain convinces you that if they change for you, then you must be valuable, and if they do not, then you must not be enough. And this false belief slowly becomes the foundation of your self-image. The darker truth is that emotionally unavailable or damaged people are not magnets. Your unhealed wounds are, and they recognize something in you that makes you easy to pull, easy to manipulate, easy to confuse, and easy to keep at an emotional distance while still holding your attention. And this dynamic is not accidental, because on a subconscious level, both of you are playing roles that were written long before you ever met, roles rooted in childhood patterns, attachment styles, and emotional survival strategies. Your brain learned a long time ago that love is not safe, and that connection is always followed by loss. And so now it chases the very type of connection that confirms that belief. Because beliefs, even painful ones, are more comfortable than uncertainty. And so you live in a loop where you are constantly seeking love and constantly proving to yourself that love disappears. And every time it happens, your brain says, "See, I was right," even as your heart breaks a little more. You may have noticed how you ignore red flags, excuse bad behavior, tolerate disrespect, and rationalize emotional neglect in the name of love, when in fact, you are just repeating a pattern that feels familiar. And unfamiliarity scares your nervous system more than pain does. And this is why, when something real, stable, and healthy comes along, you suddenly feel anxious, uncomfortable, bored, or disconnected. Because your brain does not interpret stability as love. It interprets it as danger, because it has nothing to compare it to except the chaos it learned as normal. Most people think attraction is about choice, but attraction is actually about programming. And what you are most drawn to is what most closely resembles the emotional environment in which you were shaped. And until you become aware of this, you will continue to feel the strongest chemistry with the people who are most likely to damage you, abandon you, control you, or drain you. And you will ignore the ones who are most likely to heal you. The most uncomfortable realization of all is that the reason you want who is bad for you is not because they are special, but because they activate a psychological wound that is still open inside you. And your brain has mistaken intensity for intimacy, adrenaline for affection, obsession for love, and suffering for meaning. And until this association is broken, your heart will continue to crave what hurts it the most. But here is something your brain does not want you to realize. Because if you do, the entire pattern begins to break, and that is the fact that attraction can be rewired, desire can be retrained, and the type of person who excites you can completely change once your nervous system learns what safety actually feels like, and what real connection actually means, and why true love was never meant to feel like anxiety, confusion, obsession, or emotional hunger. Right now, your mind is trying to reject some of these ideas because they challenge everything you believed about love, chemistry, and destiny. But the reason this feels so personal is because it is. And somewhere in your memory, in your body, in your experiences, you know this is true. And that realization is uncomfortable, but it is also the beginning of freedom. And as you continue listening, you are going to recognize patterns you never noticed before, not just in your relationships, but in your thoughts, your reactions, your obsessions, and the invisible emotional strings that have been pulling you since childhood. And once you see them, you will never unsee them, because awareness is the first step to breaking a cycle that has controlled your heart for far too long. This is only the surface of what is really happening inside your mind, because beneath every crush, every obsession, and every toxic attachment is a specific psychological trigger that was formed long before the person you desire ever entered your life. And in the next section, you are going to begin tracing that trigger back to its origin, back to the first time your brain learned what love was supposed to feel like, and why it built an attraction system around pain instead of peace. The first place your attraction was programmed was not in your first relationship, your first kiss, or your first heartbreak, but in the quiet, invisible, emotional environment you grew up in, because the brain of a child is constantly observing, recording, and learning what love looks like by watching how affection is given, withheld, earned, or ignored. And if love came with strings attached, emotional distance, fear, inconsistency, criticism, or abandonment, then your brain marked that experience as a template for connection, and it built your future attractions around that exact blueprint without ever asking for your permission. When you were too young to understand what was happening, your brain decided what kind of love felt normal by measuring how it felt inside your body. And if your nervous system lived in tension, waiting for approval, guessing moods, trying to earn attention, or avoiding emotional punishment, then your adult relationships now trigger that same internal state. And the strange part is that it feels like home, even when it hurts, even when it breaks you down, even when it costs you your peace. The human brain is not designed to seek happiness. It is designed to seek patterns, and once a pattern is identified, it tries to repeat it, because repetition is what feels familiar, and familiarity, even when painful, feels safer than uncertainty. And that is why you can walk into a room, meet someone new, and feel an instant, unexplainable pull toward them. Not because they are good for you, but because your subconscious recognizes their emotional energy as something it already knows how to survive. You may have noticed that the people you feel the strongest chemistry with often make you feel the most insecure, the most anxious, the most uncertain, and the most obsessed. And this is not a coincidence. Because anxiety, fear of loss, longing, overthinking, and emotional hunger are the same emotional frequencies that surrounded your earliest connections. And your brain does not see them as warning signs. It sees them as evidence that something is important and meaningful. What makes this even more powerful is that the human mind confuses emotional intensity with emotional depth. And when someone triggers your wounds, your fears, your insecurities, and your unmet needs all at once, it creates an emotional explosion in your nervous system, and your brain labels that explosion as passion, soul connection, or destiny, when it is actually just unresolved trauma being activated by a familiar type of emotional danger. If love was scarce when you were younger, then scarcity now makes attraction stronger. And if affection had to be earned, then people who are difficult, distant, or emotionally unavailable feel more valuable to you, because your brain associates difficulty with worth and effort with love. And when they finally show you a small amount of attention, your brain reacts as if you have achieved something monumental, when in reality, you have just received the bare minimum. This is why healthy love feels strange to you, because it does not require you to overthink, perform, chase, beg, suffer, or prove yourself. And without those familiar struggles, your brain does not know how to measure its value, so it assumes something is missing, even when everything is right. And instead of relaxing into safety, you feel restless, bored, suspicious, or detached, as if peace itself is a threat. Your brain has also learned to romanticize brokenness, especially if you grew up around emotional pain, and someone who is deeply flawed, unstable, distant, or damaged can feel more interesting, more mysterious, and more appealing than someone who is emotionally whole. Because part of you believes that if you can be the one who saves them, heals them, or changes them, then your own worth will finally be proven, and your own past pain will finally make sense. The truth, however, is that you are not attracted to who they are. You are attracted to who you imagine they could become, and that fantasy version of them is created by your own unmet needs, not by their actual character, and you fall in love with potential instead of reality. And every time reality disappoints you, you create a new excuse, a new explanation, a new hope. Because letting go of the fantasy would feel like losing a part of yourself. On a neurological level, this kind of attraction is incredibly powerful, because dopamine is not released when something feels good. It is released when something is anticipated, uncertain, and slightly out of reach. And the more you wonder if they will call, reply, change, choose you, or finally open up, the more your brain is hooked on the possibility, not the reality. And so you become addicted not to the person, but to the emotional roller coaster they create. You might even find yourself ignoring people who treat you with consistency, respect, and clarity, because they do not trigger that chemical rush. And your brain interprets the lack of emotional drama as a lack of chemistry, when in reality, it is simply the absence of emotional manipulation. And until your nervous system is retrained, you will continue mistaking chaos for connection and pain for passion. Another reason you want who is bad for you is because of something called repetition compulsion, which is the unconscious desire to relive a painful experience with the hope of finally getting a different outcome. And if you felt abandoned before, you now unconsciously choose people who are likely to abandon you, because part of you believes that if they stay, it will erase the original abandonment. And if they leave, it simply confirms a story you already believe about yourself. This is one of the cruelest tricks of the mind, because it convinces you that you are just unlucky in love, when in reality, you are repeatedly choosing the same emotional pattern in a different body, a different name, a different face. And until you become aware of it, the cycle feels like fate when it is actually just programming. The most dangerous part is that the more times this pattern repeats, the more deeply it becomes etched into your identity, until you begin to believe that this is simply how love is for you. And you begin to expect disappointment, prepare for abandonment, and normalize emotional pain. And this expectation shapes your behavior, your energy, your choices, and even the kind of people who are drawn to you. What your brain does not tell you is that familiarity is not truth, and intensity is not love, and obsession is not a sign of destiny. But until you consciously challenge the pattern, your subconscious will continue running the same script, and you will continue feeling drawn to the very people who slowly destroy your peace while calling it romance. Right now, as you hear these words, you may be thinking of someone specific, someone from your past, or perhaps someone in your present. And the reason they came to your mind is because your brain already knows that they fit this pattern perfectly, and that realization is uncomfortable, because it forces you to question whether your strongest desires were ever truly yours to begin with. But awareness is a powerful disruptor, because once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. And once you understand that your attraction is not always a guide, but a wound speaking, you begin to regain control over your choices, your standards, and your future. And this is where the real transformation begins. In the next section, you are going to start uncovering how this pattern shows up in your daily behavior, the subtle ways it controls your decisions, your boundaries, your self-worth, and your expectations in relationships, and how you can begin breaking free from the invisible, psychological grip that has been choosing for you all this time. Once you understand that your attraction is coming from a wound and not from clarity, you begin to notice how this pattern does not exist only in your romantic life, but in every area where you seek approval, validation, connection, or recognition, because the brain does not separate different types of relationships. It repeats the same emotional strategy everywhere. And that is why you may find yourself drawn to unfair bosses, emotionally distant friends, one-sided connections, and situations where you have to overgive just to be noticed. You start to see how often you minimize your own needs to keep someone close, how easily you make excuses for disrespect, how quickly you blame yourself when someone pulls away, and how deeply their mood affects your self-worth. And this is not because you are weak, but because your brain learned long ago that connection equals survival, and survival equals self-abandonment. The need for emotional validation from someone who withholds it becomes almost unbearable, because your mind does not see them as just a person. It sees them as a source of worth, meaning, safety, and identity. And this is why the thought of losing them feels like losing yourself, and why you will tolerate behavior that you would never accept from anyone else, simply to keep the illusion of connection alive. When someone is unhealthy for you, their approval feels more powerful than anyone else's, because your brain equates difficulty with value. And if someone who barely gives attention finally chooses you, it feels like proof that you are special. And if they do not, then it feels like proof that you are unworthy. And in this unconscious way, you place your entire identity into the hands of someone who does not even know how to hold their own. This is why your emotions rise and fall based on their actions, their tone, their availability, and their reactions. And you call this love when it is actually emotional dependency formed by an even deeper fear, which is the fear that without external validation, you are nothing, unnoticed, unwanted, invisible, and unimportant. Your brain also makes another dangerous mistake, which is that it confuses suffering with depth, and so the more you struggle, the more you believe the connection must be real, because if it hurts this much, it must matter. And this lie is one of the most destructive lies the mind can tell, because it keeps you chained to pain under the illusion of meaning. You might even begin to reject happiness subconsciously, because happiness feels too simple, too unfamiliar, too quiet. And when you have lived in emotional chaos for too long, silence feels like loneliness. Stability feels like distance, and peace feels like emptiness. And so you seek drama just to feel something, even if that something destroys you slowly. This is also why people who are emotionally secure often lose interest in you, because they feel your inner instability, your anxious attachment, your fear of abandonment, and your unconscious need for intensity, and it pushes them away, while those who are emotionally unavailable feel drawn toward you, because your energy matches theirs, and you both exist in a dance of longing and distance that feels strangely familiar. Your brain is not looking for a healthy partner. It is looking for a familiar emotional environment. And if chaos raised you, then chaos feels like love. And if neglect shaped you, then neglect feels like normal. And until you heal the original wound, you will continue calling the wrong environment home, even as it breaks you down piece by piece. You may even feel bored in healthy relationships, and that boredom is not because the person is boring, but because your brain is no longer in survival mode. And without the constant adrenaline, anxiety, and uncertainty, it does not know what to do, and it interprets the lack of emotional pain as a lack of passion, when in reality it is simply peace. This is where many people sabotage their own healing, because instead of leaning into the discomfort of something healthy, they run back to what feels more alive, even if that aliveness is actually the feeling of being triggered. And each time they return to the same pattern, the brain strengthens that neurological pathway even more, making it harder to break next time. But here is the part that matters most, which is that your brain can be retrained even after years of choosing the wrong people. Because the same brain that learned to crave pain can also learn to crave peace. And the same mind that confused chaos with love can also learn that true love feels safe, steady, calm, and secure. The first step in that retraining is awareness, because once you can see the pattern, you begin to detach from it. And when you detach from it, you begin to question your impulses instead of obeying them. And when you question them, you slowly create space for new choices to exist. You start to notice when someone triggers that old feeling of intensity, and instead of running toward it, you pause, you observe, and you ask yourself whether this feeling comes from clarity or from familiarity. And that single moment of awareness is powerful enough to break a cycle that has been running for decades. You also begin to recognize that healthy people may not create a fire in your chest, but they create a calm in your nervous system. And in that calm, you begin to rediscover who you are when you are not performing, chasing, proving, or surviving. And at first, that version of you will feel unfamiliar, but over time, it will begin to feel like the truest version of you. As your nervous system learns safety, your standards change, your tolerance for disrespect drops, your attraction begins to shift, and the type of person who once held power over you starts to look different, less magical, less mysterious, less attractive, and you finally see them clearly for what they are, which is not a soulmate, but a reflection of a past you have now outgrown. This transformation does not happen overnight, and it is not easy, because part of you will miss the intensity, the drama, the adrenaline, and the emotional chaos. But another part of you will realize for the first time what it feels like to breathe without fear, to love without anxiety, and to exist without needing permission from someone else. And the moment you stop being drawn to people who are bad for you, you step into a different reality, where love is chosen consciously instead of inherited unconsciously, and where attraction is no longer dictated by your wounds, but by your wisdom. This is the moment when the dark psychology of attraction loses its power over you, because you are no longer reacting from the past. You are responding from awareness. And once that shift happens, you no longer ask, "Why do I want who is bad for me?" And instead, you begin to say, "Why would I ever settle for something that hurts me?" And that is the moment your life begins to change. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful or eye-opening, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more practical psychology insights, self-awareness tools, and mind-sharpening advice. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.